After America's massive airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities last month, Trump was triumphant. He told reporters that Iran's facilities are being, quote, obliterated, and that we'll get whatever we want from Iran. But a couple of weeks on, and the strikes don't look like an unqualified success. It's not clear that they're as effective as Trump originally claimed, and Iran has since said that it will resume enrichment. So in this video, we're going to explain why the strikes didn't totally destroy Iran's nuclear program, and how this could force the US into more strikes in the future. We're getting ever closer to 1 million subscribers, and 68% of you aren't even subscribed yet. So lend us a hand and subscribe today. So let's get straight into it. The main reason that we think a further conflict between Iran and the US is inevitable is that it looks like Iran is going to continue with its nuclear program. This was at least in part because it looks like the US-Israel military campaign wasn't wholly successful, and Iran could still build a nuclear weapon in relatively short time. And to understand why, you need to understand how a nuclear warhead is actually made. According to the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, building a nuclear warhead requires enriching 27 kilograms of uranium to the point that it is 90% composed of uranium-235, the isotope of uranium that can sustain a chain reaction. Since Trump's withdrawal from the nuclear program in 2018, Iran has been steadily enriching uranium at its two enrichment facilities, Natanz and Fordow. Before the strikes, the IAEA estimated that Iran had a 408 kilogram stockpile of uranium enriched to 60%. This meant that Iran had a relatively short breakout time, i.e. it wouldn't have taken Iran long to enrich their 60% uranium stockpile to the required 90%. This alone wouldn't have been enough for a functioning nuke. Iran would then have to develop a missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead, which is another task in and of itself. But Israel and the US obviously don't want Iran to get a nuclear warhead, which is why the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities had two objectives. The first was to destroy this stockpile of enriched uranium, hence the US strikes on Isfahan, where the stockpile was allegedly being stored in a series of underground tunnels. The second objective was to destroy Iran's enrichment capabilities, hence the strikes on Natanz and Fordow. If the US could destroy both Iran's uranium stockpile and its enrichment capabilities, it could push Iran's breakout time from weeks to years. But despite some triumphant noises from Trump, in the past couple of weeks it's become increasingly clear that the strikes weren't totally effective. For starters, there's now a pretty widespread consensus that Iran moved its stockpile of 60% enriched uranium out of harm's way before the strikes, and no one knows where it is. Furthermore, it's not clear that the strikes did totally destroy Iran's enrichment capabilities. While Trump has claimed on multiple occasions that Natanz and Fordow were, quote, obliterated, early US and European intelligence assessments suggest otherwise, and the IAEA's director told CNN earlier this week that the damage to Iran's nuclear site was, quote, not total, and that Iran could resume enrichments in a matter of months. Even if those sites were totally destroyed, Iran has said that it's setting up a third enrichment site at an unknown location. If this site remains untouched, then Iran's breakout time could be down to a month. Iran has historically been able to install 1 to 2 cascades of centrifuges a week, and it would take a single cascade only 2 or 3 weeks to enrich 27 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium up to the required 90%. But to be honest, this disagreement over the efficacy of the strikes and Iran's breakout time slightly misses the point, because, well, airstrikes alone were always unlikely to be sufficient to completely erase Iran's ability to build a bomb. After all, Iran is a massive country with 90 million people and already has the relevant nuclear knowledge and expertise. Unless you assassinate literally every scientist, you can't bomb Iran's nuclear knowledge out of existence. Perhaps Trump and Netanyahu were instead hoping to essentially bomb Iran in submission. In other words, to demonstrate such total military superiority that even if it still has the nuclear knowledge or some of the enrichment facilities, Iran wouldn't dare restart its nuclear program. But this would be politically impossible for the Ayatollahs. They're already deeply unpopular, and it's not clear that their regime could survive such a humiliating capitulation. But more fundamentally, Israel and America's total military superiority has probably given Iran more of an incentive to continue with its nuclear program. Most of Iran will feel that the current state of affairs, where Iran is essentially at the mercy of the American and Israeli militaries, is just untenable, and they need some sort of deterrence. With their proxy network degraded and conventional military force incapable of competing with the US and Israel, Iran's only real shot at a deterrence is a nuke. Anyway, the Ayatollahs have apparently come to exactly this conclusion. In his first post-ceasefire speech, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei accused Trump of exaggerating the damage caused to Iran's nuclear facilities, and Iran's ambassador to the UN announced that they would resume enrichment as permitted under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran has also suspended its cooperation with the IAEA, criticizing the organization's failure to condemn the strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities and accusing it of leaking intel to Israel. So, what happens if Iran does indeed resume enrichment and pursue a policy of nuclear ambiguity? Well, there are broadly two outcomes available: a new nuclear deal or more airstrikes. Now, a new deal doesn't look likely at the moment. Trump has said that he's not offering Iran anything and demanded, quote, unconditional surrender, while the Iranian Foreign Ministry said that they couldn't negotiate with the Trump administration because they're, quote, in no way reliable or trustworthy. But if no deal's agreed, then the US will have to restart its air campaign to keep Iran's nuclear program down. Trump has already said as much, telling the BBC last month that he would, quote, absolutely consider bombing Iran again if they restarted enrichment. But this opens the door to an indefinite US air campaign over Iran. And there are clear echoes of Iraq here. The US, UK and France had to stage constant air raids over Iraq through the 90s and early 2000s in order to maintain the no-fly zones imposed after the 1991 Gulf War. But it soon became clear that this wasn't sustainable. France withdrew in 1996, and a full-scale invasion followed in 2003. All of this plays into a broader feeling coming out of America at the moment. At one time, the US seemed to be a steady, stabilizing force in global politics. But it seems that those days are over, with American influence, popularity, and dominance on the decline. So in the next issue of our magazine, Too Long, we're discussing this shift and the potential that we're currently observing the end of the American order. In that section of the magazine, we unpack everything from the collapse of democratic norms in the US to the decline of American soft power, and if the US can maintain its dominance in energy and technology. We also discuss the people who could pick up the reins from the US, like if China, Europe, or even a new multipolar order could replace America. This magazine is our longest ever, coming in at 76 pages, and it's full of our very best journalism and well thought through analysis. That goes beyond just the US too, with more than half of the magazine dedicated to other topics, from Germany's new focus on military might, the offshoring of migrants around the world, how Nigel Farage could become Britain's next Prime Minister, or our section where we ask a handful of experts what's really driving anti-establishment sentiment around the world. You can pre-order a copy of Too Long from our website right now, or you can subscribe to make sure that you never miss an issue going forward. And if you do, you'll also get 20% off every copy as long as you're subscribed. Plus, just this week, if you use code AmericanOrder, you'll get an additional 20% off any subscription, bringing down the price to as little as £6.40. So pre-order a copy now to get yourself all of that extra content and support the journalism that we do here at TLDR every single day.